New studio. It's finally finished. Well, built at least. It's still a bit of a work in progress, but yeah, not too bad. Better than my dining room. Anyway, that's for a different video where I'll do a full studio tour and everything else that's been going on. But today is all about this. It's a great phone, but there are still a couple of issues with it, some of which can be fixed, others that, well, maybe we'll have to wait for the iPhone 14. So first of all, and it's not a big deal really, but it doesn't support the latest Wi-Fi 6E, which is a bit of a shame. There were some rumors that it would support the latest version of Wi-Fi, which theoretically is the same speed as Wi-Fi 6, but because 6E uses its own dedicated 6 GHz spectrum of radio waves, it's less congested and therefore you're more likely to have better bandwidth and therefore more likely to reach those potential max speeds. Now, you do need a Wi-Fi 6E router as well as compatible devices, and it is still quite rare, but most flagship Android phones, if they have the Snapdragon 888, do support it, but not on the iPhone. So really that's going to be something I have to wait for the iPhone 14, hopefully. It's not a huge deal right now, and almost no one actually owns a Wi-Fi 6E router. In terms of future-proofing, because you might want to hold on to this for 2, 3, 4 years, it would have been nice to see. The second problem, and one that was rumored to be coming but unfortunately didn't materialize, is having an always-on display. Again, it's a pretty standard feature on Android now, and while you could argue it drains battery, well, it does drain battery, the flip side of that is that you might not actually have to unlock your phone as often to check what's going on because you can at a glance see all your notifications, and that could actually, in fact, end up saving you battery. Either way, it's a moot point because we don't have support for it yet again, but it is something I'd like to see, possibly that could come with iOS 16 or an update. It's not necessarily something we'd have to wait for an all-new iPhone to see, but right now, no AOD. Okay, problem number 3, and as I was researching this video, I came across a few people who had sort of auto brightness and screen dimming issues. Max Tech, who I'm a big fan of, he actually had some of that screen dimming when he was recording with a drone using the phone. Now, there's a couple of things here. Firstly, you can actually disable auto brightness if you want. It's in the accessibility and the display settings, something that's a bit hidden away and most people don't know is there, so you can turn that off and that prevents, well, the screen dimming based on the ambient light around it. It also turns out that True Tone can cause some issues with dimming depending on the environment. So generally, I actually recommend turning True Tone off, not least because it might cause that dimming that some people are experiencing, although that also may have been fixed with an update. But for me, I often forget that I've turned it on and then editing a photo in Lightroom or Instagram or something, and I post it and I realize I've had True Tone on. So my photo's then actually a lot cooler in real life and I kind of forgotten about it. So while True Tone is nice in terms of reducing blue light and making it a bit more comfortable for your eyes, particularly in low light, for me at least, I just prefer turning True Tone off. So this next problem was actually widely talked about when these iPhones first came out, and a lot of reviews mentioned it. The camera would automatically switch between the main lens and the ultra wide when you got close up to your subject, so you get this weird ghosting transition effect. So in a lot of situations, you don't want to use the ultra wide, you want to stick with the main. So hats off to Apple actually, they acknowledged this issue and they fixed it. I'm on the iOS 15.1 developer beta 3 right now. I believe it will be coming to the public version soon. It may already be as you're watching this, but in the camera settings, we now have this auto macro toggle. So I would suggest making sure this is turned off so that it doesn't automatically switch unless you do it manually. Sticking with the camera, and another new feature we've had with the latest update is support for Apple's ProRes video. They've been talking about it, but it's just come out now, and so you can actually shoot in much higher bitrate, so much higher quality video at up to 4K 30. But there are a couple of issues with this. Firstly, you can't shoot in 4K 60, it tops out at 4K 30, which is fine, but having that 60 FPS option is nice for videographers who then like to slow down the footage in the edit to get slow motion. But the bigger issue is file sizes, and then actually how to get the files off the phone, because we're talking 6 gigs of storage for every 1 minute shot at 4K. It's like 600 megabits per second of data. Realistically, if you are going to shoot a lot of this, go for at least the 512, if not the 1 terabyte storage option. But then the bigger problem is how you then get those huge files off the phone. You can AirDrop to your MacBook or your Mac or something, or your iPad, but then you'll need a very fast internet connection if you've got tens or hundreds of gigs of videos to transfer, or you can do it through a wired connection. But because we've still got this bloody Lightning port rather than the latest Thunderbolt USB-C, this is essentially USB 2, so it is painfully slow. And it really would have been a good reason for Apple to update this to USB-C, as they have done on every iPad, except for the cheapest entry-level iPad, which is the only other device to still have a Lightning port. it just makes getting these files off the phone a bit frustrating. It really should be USB-C with Thunderbolt 3 like we have on the higher end iPads. Then we have this cinematic mode, which I actually have been quite impressed by, although I would suggest reducing the bokeh blur a little bit to make it look less artificial. But the issue is you can only shoot it at 1080p 30, and while 4K would have been nice, actually more importantly would be an option to shoot at 1080p 24, which is a more cinematic frame rate. Okay, the last thing I'll say about video. As you can see, we still have these lens flares. It's something J.J. Abrams may love because every single one of his movies has lens flares everywhere, but for me, it's a bit annoying, and I do wish Apple would fix it because we've had this for years now. Another problem I was having, but it does seem to have been fixed with the latest updates, is my finger not actually registering touches. It was particularly in the YouTube app. I could touch the thumbnail of a photo, it just wouldn't launch, it wouldn't start playing. You'd have to touch the profile picture or open and restart the app. It's something I know a few other people have experienced, but with the latest 15.1 beta 3 software that I'm running here, it doesn't seem to be happening anymore. So that was another problem like that auto macro mode with the camera, but again, it seems Apple have fixed it. So just teething issues with the new launch, it seems. Speaking of the software though, and I do have a couple of things on my wish list, especially as someone jumping ship from an Android phone recently. And the first one is, I really wish we had a universal back button. Most apps let you swipe in from the left to go back, but not all, and then sometimes you have to go up to the top left and press back, which is a little bit awkward on the size of the Pro Max. But also, since I mostly use the phone in my right hand, it would be so convenient to be able to swipe in from the right hand side to go back as well, like we can do on Android. Also, particularly on the Pro Max with this huge 6.7-inch screen, the fact that we still don't have any kind of split screen multitasking option is a bit frustrating. And also considering how good the split screen mode is on iPads, I wish we had something like that on the iPhone. The other thing I missed a little bit about my S21 Ultra is just how much faster it felt. While obviously they're both 120Hz screens and this is incredibly powerful with the A15, the fairly lengthy animations that we get on iPhone just makes it feel a little bit more sluggish, particularly if you're a bit techie and you're happy to jump into the developer options and then reduce those animation times further. It would be great to have an option for faster animations or something on here, and while there are some accessibility modes around turning off the sort of transitions, it doesn't actually speed anything up. So again, that is something I'd like to see. Now, one of the absolute standouts with these new iPhones, and particularly the Pro Max, is the battery life. But the problem is the charging hasn't really kept up. And while this does technically support 27-watt charging, it really isn't much faster than just the basic 20-watt. It's only about 2 minutes faster, charging up to 50%, and in my tests, it takes the exact same 1 hour, 46 minutes to top up to 100. So while this technically does support a higher wattage, it doesn't really make much difference to the charging speed, which is still really lagging behind some of the Android competition. And finally, I have to say, I would quite like to see a fingerprint reader on the iPhone. It's something that we had obviously on the older ones with the Touch ID home button. We have on iPad still, but not on the iPhone, which isn't the end of the world because the TrueDepth Face ID is the best in the business, particularly with the IR sensor, so it's great in low light. But when you're out and about and you want to pay for things, through contactless and you have to put your mask down to do the Face ID, for me at least, I would quite like to have a in-screen or even just a power button that doubles as a fingerprint reader, but maybe that's just me. So that is a lot of complaining about the iPhone, but don't get me wrong, it is a terrific phone. I still highly recommend it. I think the 13 Pro is probably the best phone in the world right now for most people. And of course, this Pro Max is my everyday daily phone, but nothing's perfect. There's always room for improvement. And actually, it has been good to see that Apple have addressed some of the early issues through software updates already. But what about you? Are there any other problems you've been experiencing with the 13 that maybe I've missed? Let me know in the comments below. And if you did enjoy this video and want to see more from me and this fancy new studio, then a cheeky like and subscribe would be lovely. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chap.